The other thing, of course, is the censorship. And the censorship is an indication of failure. If your ideas are working, if your ideas are fresh, if you're not just lying all the time, you do not have to censor. You don't have to censor people. You don't have to censor people when you're telling the truth. You have to censor people when they're telling the truth. That's the whole nature. That's the whole nature of tyranny.
That was Andrew Klavan giving some interesting thoughts and insight into our cultural moment right now. And in this video, I wanted to actually talk about the book 1984 a little bit. It's a book a lot of people reference, and we talk so much in society about things being Orwellian when we see certain trends, especially with government power. And that term Orwellian is referring to George Orwell, the writer of the book 1984, and the dystopian society that he describes in this book. Almost on cue with this, as I was thinking about this book and wanting to talk a little bit about it here, there was a story that came out this week about an actress that was fired for her beliefs. And this is part of something that I've been talking about recently on my channel, cancel culture. And it says that this actress, Gina Carrano, what did she say? The Mandalorian star fired after Instagram Holocaust post. So she is an actress that is on the show, or was on the show, The Mandalorian, which is a Star Wars-based show on Disney+. The article says Gina Carrano has been fired from her role as Cara Dune from Disney+'s The Mandalorian over offensive social media posts. The actress and ex-MMA fighter is no longer a part of the cast of the Star Wars series after she shared a post on social media that compared being a Republican today to the experience of Jewish people during the Holocaust. Gina Carrano is not currently employed by Lucasfilm, and there are no plans for her to be in the future, a Lucasfilm spokesperson said in a statement per The Hollywood Reporter. Nevertheless, her social media posts denigrating people based on their cultural and religious identities are abhorrent and unacceptable. So it sounds like what she did was really bad, and we're going to see a quote of one of her posts and see, wow, it's actually pretty interesting that she got fired for this. It says, Carrano, a vocal Donald Trump supporter, came under heavy criticism after posting the offensive Instagram post. So what did she say exactly? The post read, Jews were beaten in the streets not by Nazi soldiers, but by their neighbors, even by children. Because history is edited, most people today don't realize that to get to the point where Nazi soldiers could easily round up thousands of Jews, the government first made their own neighbors hate them simply for being Jews. How is that any different from hating someone for their political views? Now, what she's saying here is definitely strongly termed. You can see why some people might be offended. But the bottom line truth of what she's talking about here is that we have to be very careful about being stirred up to hate people for a certain view that they hold to. And so she's really just warning here, is how I read this, that we don't be stirred up to hate people for their political views and allow that hatred to give control to the government to act out violently and oppressively towards certain people. It's just really a warning there. I like, by the way, the Babylon Bee article referencing this situation. This is a satire site, in case you don't know. It says, to prove cancel culture doesn't exist, Disney fires actress who condemned cancel culture. So that's a kind of a good way of looking at what's going on here. Definitely a humorous way of putting it. But what's happening in our culture right now definitely ties in with some of the themes that we read about in the book 1984. Now, I think some people take it too far. Every time government does anything at all, they associate it with a dystopian society. I don't think we need to be extreme about it, but I definitely think there are some things that we should learn from and we should think about, reflect on from the book 1984. In relationship to our culture. I was thinking about the culture that he describes, this dystopian society where Big Brother, the government, is controlling everybody's lives, in contrast to the United States of America and the way that we were founded and the principles that we were founded upon. There were a few different themes in this book that I thought really speak into our culture and the way that we were founded versus some of the things that we're experiencing right now. And the first is freedom of thought. He really brings that out in this book. A lot of people have heard of the term thought police, which is from this book, 1984, that the government actually in this story wants to control what people think. The government knows that if people think in ways that are not in line with their ideology, that those people can become dangerous to the power of the government. And so in order to control people, they even have to make sure that they're controlling their thoughts. Now, we might think this is not something at all we would do in our society. And yet, really, when you think about what happened with Gina Carrano, on some level, they are saying, if you think certain things and you express those things that you think, there will be consequences. And that's a reality. That actually is happening more and more in our culture right now. Really, what she was arguing for was not for one particular political perspective. She was actually, I think, saying we need to allow for a variety of perspectives. And that traditionally, historically, has been the value of our culture. Our country was founded on the idea that you can have different viewpoints. You can argue those viewpoints, you can debate about those viewpoints, but we do allow for freedom of thought. The second theme brought out in this book is reality beyond humanity. Because our nation was founded in a Judeo-Christian way of looking at the world, there is a belief in a higher transcendent reality beyond humans, beyond our own intellect and our own way of looking at the world. But in the book 1984, there was a quote that really jumped out at me, and this is actually a government official who is torturing the main character of the book, Winston, because Winston has betrayed the government. And he is reconditioning Winston to submit to the government and think the right way and ultimately love Big Brother. So this government official, O'Brien, says, I tell you, Winston, that reality is not external. Reality exists in the human mind and nowhere else. Not in the individual mind, which can make mistakes, and in any case soon perishes, only in the mind of the party, which is collective and immortal. Whatever the party holds to be truth is truth. So again, this sounds like something very abstract. That would never happen. But then I think about what we were talking about recently with critical theories and applied postmodernism that we're seeing in our culture right now. And that whole belief system is that there are narratives that really determine what is true for a certain group of people. And those narratives allow people to have dominance and control. And what we're seeing in our culture right now is that there are certain ways that you are supposed to talk. There are certain terms you're supposed to use because they will uphold the narrative that is being pushed. And truth is not seen as some objective thing. It's really seen as a subjective thing. And whoever is in control is really the arbiter of what society will look at as true. I mean, that's really right from the book 1984, but we do see elements of those ideas coming out right now in our culture. There are certain terms that are now being redefined with an agenda in mind. So whenever you get rid of the Christian, Judeo-Christian idea of an ultimate reality, then you have to have a new arbiter of reality. And we've seen this for decades, but now it's being applied more and more in our culture, that we are the arbiters of reality, and we have to push a narrative in order to fulfill what we think is good for society. Very different than how our country was founded, which was that there is a outside reality, there's ultimate truth, and is based on divine truth. The third theme is human nature and corruption. That's definitely a theme explored in the book 1984. It really recognizes and explores the depths of human depravity. I mean, in a very graphic way, you will see that humans are not looked at as just being totally good if left to their own devices. I think there was such a realism that came out in literature, especially in the mid-1900s like this book, after 2 world wars, after the aftermath of those world wars, and totalitarian regimes that had come upon the historical scene. I think it was so vivid at that time that human nature has some real flawed elements to it and can become very corrupt and extremely evil in the way that it carries out actions and treats other people. And that's really what the book 1984 speaks to. It really speaks to the corruption within human nature. So the founding fathers of the United States believed that humans can't be left to their own devices, that there need to be checks and balances. And if we're not careful, we can just buy into that same thinking that one side needs to have all power because they're the good side. And that is always the lure. I think even in a book like this, the government controlling everything in one way would have said what they're doing is for the good of people. But that is where we so easily go astray, is that we think we're doing something good, but in reality, we begin to oppress and mistreat certain people and to justify that for what we say is the ultimate good. There are so many lessons to be learned when we think about a book like this. So I thought it would be good to look at some of these themes. But I'm just amazed at the contrast between what our country was founded upon, the values that we held to as a country, and see the themes in this book, and then look at what's happening today. And you can see even a great culture like ours, there's a lot of good things about it. We're susceptible to the same patterns that we see throughout human history and that we see portrayed in this book. And we always need to heed these warnings. So I definitely think it's good that people bring up this book. And I know there are some people who think we're already there. We're already experiencing 1984. I don't think we're fully experiencing those things, but I definitely think that there are currents and streams of thought in our culture right now that are reinforcing some of these problems that are talked about in this book. So I hope we can get back to the very ideals that we were founded on as a country. Certainly as Christians, these are things that resonate with us: the idea of freedom of thought, reality beyond humanity, the fact that humans are corrupt and left to their own devices will do some very evil things. This is definitely part and parcel of our worldview as Christians. As we've gotten away as a culture from that Christian value system and principles that our founding fathers believed, we can see that we are definitely headed in directions that tie in with the book 1984. But also as Christians, we look beyond what this book is talking about, because this book is really talking about the hopelessness. But we as Christians know the one who brings hope. That's why we have what is called the gospel, the good news, that we're bringing the light of truth and Jesus into the culture. And if we don't as Christians bring that truth, then humans are ultimately headed in the same direction that they always are, which is self-destruction. So really it just encourages us as Christians to be bearing that truth, bringing that truth into the culture and pointing people to the gospel. So those are some of my thoughts on what's happening in our culture right now in relation to the book 1984. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. But thank you so much for taking some time to listen to some of my thoughts, brought to you from A Frisch Perspective.